I have finished my Fiber Fest shawl, so let's have a little bit of a pattern review. I have been working on the Fiber Fest shawl by Stephen West, and I have just finished it. Just took it off of blocking in my basement on the futon because this thing turned out gigantic, and I kind of want to talk through the whole process. All right, I got Jackie here. We'll see how long he decides to stick around, but let's talk about the kind of specifications of this shawl. So this shawl takes 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn. And when I say 3 skeins, I mean 3 full 100-gram skeins, because I actually ran out of 2 of my colors because I started with 2 not quite full balls of yarn and ran out just before the end. So that was really frustrating. So definitely make sure that you are starting with full skeins on this project. This shawl was specifically designed to use 3 kind of not matching skeins of yarn that you might pick up at a fiber festival when you're picking up 1 skein here and there from different designers because you like how they look, and then you come home with a bunch of single skeins of yarn, something I do all the time, and then don't really know how to put them together. That was the same thought process that I had for my sideline shawl, although that used about 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn, and obviously this shawl is significantly larger and a lot more complicated than mine. The shape of this shawl is a very, very skinny crescent shape, so it's really long, but not that deep for how big of a crescent it is. For techniques, it starts off with an I-cord tab cast on. You are knitting I-cords the entire time for the sides of it, and then you will finish with an I-cord bind off. So it does have the full I-cord wrap, which I personally really like with a shawl. I just think it's such a nice edge to have across the entire shawl. There's a little bit of garter stitch at the beginning, and then you go into the kind of bobble and stockinette section. So this section here where you are knitting flat stockinette for the background, and then kind of a bobble popcorn stitch for the stripes. All of these kind of bobble sections are also short rows, so they are making the crescent much longer without getting too deep. And then there's also stripes of just plain 1x1 brioche that kind of breaks that up. Those are not short rows, they are just complete the whole time. Then the shawl ends with a slightly more interesting brioche where you're using some increases and decreases to kind of start that chevron pattern. And then you end, again, keeping that chevron going and knitting in stockinette and reverse stockinette. The shawl had a couple of new techniques for me. I have knit brioche once before in the round for a hat, and that was maybe more than a year ago, and I haven't touched it since. And I had kind of psyched myself out on it. I was like, no, it's gonna be too complicated. I remember finding the hat kind of frustrating. So I don't know, I just never was trying anything with brioche in it because I was like, nah, it's maybe just not for me. But I saw the shawl on Ravelry and instantly really liked it. And I am someone who is very hit or miss with Stephen West patterns. They're very fun to knit, but oftentimes I know that I wouldn't get use out of the finished object. So in that case, I'm like, why would I knit it? So this is one of the rare examples of a Stephen West shawl that I was willing to take the time and effort to fully knit the whole thing because I actually liked the end result and knew that it would work in my wardrobe. It was something that I would wear and enjoy knitting. If you follow me online, you might know that I had quite a difficult time picking yarn for this shawl. It was kind of a nightmare, actually. I ended up using, I think, 5 or 6 different color combinations before I came up with this one. Nothing that I was choosing was looking right, especially when it got to the brioche. I had the very first section, it would look fine, which is just a little bit of garter stitch. Then it would go into the bobbles, and then I would get to the first section of brioche and instantly hated every single option until I got to this one. So when I got to this option, I actually had a couple of different contenders for what ended up being this golden color. And I did something smart finally by just swatching it in the brioche. So I just did a teeny tiny brioche swatch to see how the different color options would work together before choosing the yellow. And speaking of yarn, the yarn that I used is kind of all over the place. So I have where did you go? So the main color in this shawl is kind of the dark pink color here in the bobbles. That is actually yarn that I dyed myself years and years ago. I have absolutely no idea what I used. I don't even know the techniques. I honestly think it might have been a Kool-Aid dye because I think that is what I was using at the time. but again, I think maybe 4 years old. I haven't done anything with it since. Obviously, I actually used it for the heels and toes of a pair of socks because it's Knit Picks sock yarn that you can buy there, which was just enough to make me run out for this project. So definitely, like I said, use full skeins. The light pink color is from Moondrake Fiber Co. in the shade Pink Salt, which I really love. It's such a beautiful, like light avocado kind of pink. I had used it before for like the edge and bottom of a cowl. Again, didn't think that it would be enough to impact like how much I would need for a shawl, because I often find that shawl patterns especially will be like, you need 3 skeins of yarn, but really you need 3/4 of 3 skeins of yarn. So I thought it would be okay, was not okay. So you can actually see here, I switched to a white kind of creamy shade that I used to finish off the background of the shawl. I had planned on striping these, like going every other stripe. And then as soon as I started doing that, again, I just ran out of the pink. So I did 1 stripe of the white, 1 stripe of the pink, didn't have enough pink to finish it, and then just used white for the rest of that background shade. And then the yellow color that is the background of the brioche and this kind of edging here in the chevron is Pearl Soho's Linen Quill in Turmeric. I did start with a full skein of yarn on this one, and this is about how much I have left. So this is kind of what I was expecting for all of the skeins, because that's generally how I end up with shawls, is you have like a pretty good chunk left from 1 skein, but was not the case with the other 2 colors. So I already said what I did to fix this kind of background shade by changing it over to the white, but I didn't mention how I kind of finished off the brioche. So what I did in this very final section of the brioche was went every other row with the main color that I already had in the dark pink, and then I was looking through my stash to see something that was kind of the same intensity and in the same kind of color vein, and the closest I got was this Knit Picks Stroll in Buoy, which is definitely more red. You can see the difference in the shades here, but I think going every other really helped to kind of even it out so that it wasn't just, I didn't want it to go like straight from the pink right into this kind of more orange tone. So I went every other, which meant I had to cut it on each end for both colors, which meant a lot more ends to even, but I do think that it ended up being worth it because I would not have liked having the brioche like main colors split halfway through it. Even though it was like a little bit of comedy of errors on my part with all of the swatching at the beginning and then running out of 2 of the colors of yarn, I still really enjoyed knitting on this. It was the kind of thing where as soon as you started getting bored with the technique that you were working on, you started working on something else. And then each section isn't like so difficult, but it's just enough to kind of keep your brain engaged, which was what I was looking for and really enjoyed working on throughout the entire process. I think including the swatching and not necessarily knitting monogamously on this, it took me a little bit over a month, which feels like kind of a long time, but it turned out gigantic. And that is kind of my one thing that I don't like about this shawl is just how big it turned out. None of my cords I had were long enough as I was working on this shawl. So when it got to the end, it's more than 500 stitches for each row. And all of them were really scrunched up on the cord that I was using. So I was like, okay, by the time I get to the end of this, it's just gonna be a surprise with how big it is, because when you have a cord that's only like, I don't know, this long, all of those stitches scrunched up together, you just can't really get a good feel for how big it's going to be. And it turned out big. I can include a picture of this. The only place that was like clean and out of the way and that no one was going to step on was our futon in the basement. I had to bring it down. Like I was like, oh, I'll just put it on the couch in the basement, but it was too big to even do that. I had to fold down the futon component of the couch in order to spread the whole thing out. So I think really the only way that you can make it smaller is by taking out one of like the brioche and short row repeats, because that's adding, you know, a little bit of length on this side. It's adding that little bit of depth, but like, look how gigantic this turned out to be. It's so big. Its wingspan is longer than mine, just barely. And I think I'll measure the exact distance of like the deepest part of it. but it is a big shawl, and especially doing it in like quite bright springy colors, it's a little bit warmer than I need for this time of year. And that's kind of on me. I could have done it in darker colors, which I would wear more in winter, but now I have a big giant spring scarf. Hi, how you doing? So, reknitability. Do I think that I would knit this again? Maybe. It's definitely like an undertaking. It's quite a lengthy project to work on, but like I said, I really enjoyed the whole thing. Like none of it got to the point of feeling tedious besides the I-cord bind off. That was kind of rough, but if we exclude the I-cord bind off, which took me absolutely forever, I did really enjoy the whole process of knitting this shawl. Even like the very long purl rows towards the end was not that bad. I just really liked working on the whole thing. But like I said, next time I would start with enough yarn to actually complete the project. I really like how Stephen West formats his patterns, like literally the formatting of the pattern itself, because each different section will be on its own page. So for me, like in the patterns that I've designed, I do try to optimize the space to make sure that if you're printing it, it doesn't turn out to be really, really long. But I do think visually while you're going through it, having each step be a different page is kind of nice. And I did find his instructions completely clear, easy to understand. The whole thing flowed really nicely, and there was a lot of pictures that kind of showed you where you were at as you were going to. I didn't end up needing any tutorials for this shawl, but he does also have a lot of tutorials on his YouTube channel that I have watched before and are really, really good. But I think that kind of covers it for my Fiber Fest shawl. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye.